And good afternoon, everybody. This is E. Marcel Portude. Welcome to today's show, the Sports Inquirer Show. We're recording this on July 1st, 2019. So we are in the midst of our summer action here on the Sports Inquirer. Very excited that you're able to join us today on the show. We have a jam-packed show for you today. We're going to discuss the NBA free agency period that took place last night and throughout this week. But we're going to do our first portion of the free agency period for the NBA. In our Stagger Screen portion of the show, we'll get into Durant and Irving going to Brooklyn, the dismay of the Knicks, Philadelphia making moves, and the Warriors making their decisions. So we'll break down all of that for you. We'll kind of go piece by piece, team by team. I think that's the best way to approach it. Next up will be the Offside Trap, where we will discuss Atlanta United and their home win over Montreal Impact on June 29th. We'll also discuss two international competitions with the Women's World Cup taking place in France in the semifinal portion of that competition. Actually, also in the semis of the Gold Cup. Both United States national teams are involved in that. So I will touch on those tournaments and may get some miscellaneous department, may discuss some baseball, politics, and Netflix. So if we have enough time, we'll get to those. If not, we'll make sure to hit those up on our next show. But as always, if you want to find out everything that we're doing, head to the mothership, to sportsinquirer.net. That's a very good way to find out everything going on with our site and our business. We have some full-length interviews or pressers with several Atlanta United entities, such as we have manager Frank Boer, Michael Parkhurst, and who else do we have? I think those are the main two that we have right now up on the site. So make sure that you check that out. It was like before the Montreal match, but they touch on a lot of different topics that we'll discuss later on in the show. But if you want the full length portions of those pressers or interviews, make sure you head to the site and do that. You can head to our Twitter and Instagram on the Sports Inquirer. That's all one word. Very active yesterday with my thoughts on the NBA free agency. Respect to all of the journalists out there. I was retweeting them. That's something I'm very sensitive about, is that if I did not find out the source myself or the information, I want to make sure whoever did it gets credit for it. And I did a lot of that yesterday. So I retweeted a lot of signings and breaking news and gave my thoughts on them. Best way to follow all of that is to go to our Twitter page. And I said, go to Sports Inquirer. It's all one word. Instagram. That's another way to get all of that type of stuff. Facebook, head to the Sports Inquirer or Sports Inquirer. Separate. We have two different pages. Go separate. Go either one. So that's a great way to follow up everything. And then finally, subscribe to us on YouTube and SoundCloud under the Sports Inquirer. We actually are starting to do more sports-specific podcasts. We've already brought back Verbal Submission, which is a podcast focused on combat sports. We're going to record one of those shows, our newest edition, tomorrow. So if you want to get all of the news in professional wrestling from WWE to AEW, Impact, New Japan, all of that stuff, as well as UFC and boxing, make sure that you go to those pages, our YouTube and SoundCloud or sportsinquirer.net, and look out for Verbal Submission, which are sports-specific shows in that regard as far as the combat sports. We also brought back our other podcast. I think which one? Yeah, we're trying to bring back Beanball, which is a baseball-specific one. We also are trying to bring back, or we have brought back, some of our basketball ones. So make sure you just head to the site and subscribe to us. And whenever we post the new ones, we will actually have it up for you. And you know what? Since we're on that move, let me look up the page right now. Make sure everything is up and running. It's been running, but I'll just give you some examples of everything that we've been doing. So I'm pulling up the YouTube page. We'll go that way. That's a quicker, not quicker, but a different way to do that. Let's see your channel. And let's see what we have up there. Yeah, we got Sports Inquirer Show. As I said, we've done some ARC. We've done those shows. We have video interviews from Atlanta United, Frank Boer, Michael Parkhurst, Eric Remedi. Yes, that was the other player I was thinking of. So we have that content up. We also have the presser from the Atlanta Hawks with Travis Schlenk after the same night of the draft. We attended that. So we were able to get there. Yeah, Stagger Screen podcast. That is the one specifically for. We have a Stagger Screen portion of the show of our basketball, but we did a specific podcast about a week ago previewing free agency. And when we do our next one, it'll be kind of in the middle of free agency. So we have all of that going on there. That podcast is more about the NBA draft and my thoughts on all the way from Zion Williamson being selected by the Pelicans to RJ Barrett going to the Knicks, and a lot of Hawks-specific discussion with the selection of DeAndre Hunter and Cam Reddish in the first round for Atlanta, since we're Atlanta-based entity. So we discussed them quite a bit. So make sure you check that one out as well. And, verbal submission as I've gone over all of that. So, make sure you check out the site and that's our YouTube and SoundCloud. Just look us up, and all of that will be up there. So, very excited about today's show. We're going to delve deep into the first 48 hours of quote-unquote, for first 48 or 24 hours. Well, I'll get into why there's quote-unquotes with that. But, we're going to take a quick break. And when we come back, we're going into all of the NBA news and notes from the past day or two here on the Sports Inquirer Show. All right. Well, thank you, Rick, for coming back to our show, Sports Inquirer Show, as we're recording this on July 1st, 2019. Free agency is one of those things in sports where there is a winner and a loser. Obviously, you have the winners, the selected person that has the right of free agency, and they have the choice of going to one team or another. And I look at the perspective of the player and the choices they have, whether they've come into the league in a strong form, a strong way, and have a bunch of suitors and trying to make a maximum amount of money, or you have a older player trying to find his or her way into that league, and maybe get that one final big check or contract before they have to retire for whatever reason. And I say winners and losers in the fact that I'm just in the past 24 hours or the past week or so of free agency. In the NBA, by the way, there was such criticism of Magic Johnson with the Lakers and quote-unquote tampering when he was mentioning players, or he wanted to work with Ben Simmons in the offseason while he was an executive with the Lakers. He got fined for that and was heavily criticized for it. And while tampering, I understand, is something that you don't want to have going on, how is it that all of these long-term contracts worth hundreds of millions of dollars literally go from technically non-existent at 6 p.m. Eastern Standard Time on June 30th to 1 hour later, we have the details of the full contract. We have full trades taking place. Well, that's supposed to be within the first 48 or first 24 hours. Tampering. Kevin Durant did not sign his technically he may have signed his contract last night with the Brooklyn Nets, but that deal's been in the works for weeks. How is it possible that he was technically an employee of the Golden State Warriors? And I'm not picking on Durant. I'm just using him as an example because he's the biggest name that was out there. How is it possible that he was a Golden State Warrior, had a contract with the team, became a free agent, technically, and then less than 3 hours later has signed with another team across the country in the Brooklyn Nets? How does that happen? And I think it just shows that the rules of tampering are antiquated, outdated, and if you're going to allow players to sign and all these trades to take place in such a short amount of time after they're technically free agents, it's a farce of a system. I don't mind it, but just be honest about it, NBA, about how it takes place. And the thing I've noticed about as well, my overarching thoughts, and that's it, we'll break down the teams individually, and my overarching thought will kind of be a theme throughout this. Maybe I'm biased because I'm a New Yorker. I've been living in Atlanta close to 10 years now. Went to college in Nashville, Tennessee. So I've actually lived in the South. I did the math. I've lived in the Southeast equal amount of time than between Atlanta and Nashville. Maybe it's leaning more towards the Southeast now as a Southerner, living in the Southeast more than I have as a New Yorker. But my first sentiment is always that I'm a New Yorker. Born and raised, Brooklyn Jewish Hospital, legit Brooklynite. Lived in Williamsburg my whole teenage life and adolescence and all that stuff. So not someone who's a come by night that just hears about from girls, the TV show, or a hot band, like TV on the radio mention Brooklyn, or hey, this celebrity lives on Bedford Avenue. No, I'm legit born and raised. I spent all of my time in Brooklyn. Hearing the perception of the Nets and the Knicks and the dichotomy of it from outside of New Yorkers who aren't from there is very interesting. They make it seem like there's New York, which is always considered Manhattan, which is where the Knicks are based. And then there's the rest of the boroughs. They're Bronx, Staten Island, Queens, and Brooklyn. And they make it seem like it's Manhattan is New York and the center of the universe, and all the other boroughs are secondary. And maybe I say that because as I'm a Brooklynite, just as much as I'm a New Yorker, I went to high school in Manhattan, and I know that there's always been kind of rivalries between the boroughs. Like if you're from the Bronx, you don't like Brooklyn. If you're from Queens, you don't like Manhattan, and vice versa, all that stuff. But the way the world has changed in the past 10, 15 years, really, it started when I was in New York, and I left New York in 1999. So I saw some of the changes taking place. Gentrification, some want to use that harsh term, and that's another discussion for another day. But the implementation of businesses and different races and ages and demographics and sexualities and things along those lines, moving in between the boroughs. It was always perceived, I know in Williamsburg, where I'm from, it was perceived to be for Latin Americans, particularly Dominicans and Puerto Ricans and Hasidic Jews. That was the perception of Williamsburg when I was growing up. And me being a black man, I had no problems there. I didn't have no tangible issues in relation to this conversation. But it's changed now where you have different types of races, different ages. I remember when I used to go to Greenpoint, it was known as a lot of Eastern Europeans. Now a different generation has come along, and it's hard. You still see the Eastern European influence and some of the shops and even some of the people, but it's become more diversified. And Brooklyn has been the biggest forefront of this diversification. Long ago, it was considered an insult to live in Brooklyn or be from Brooklyn to some Manhattanites. I remember Sex and the City. Yes, I watched the show. Don't hate on me. One of the big storylines was when, was it Miranda or Samantha? One of them. I think it was the lawyer. One of her. She was a lawyer, and she had a child with her boyfriend, and she had to move to Brooklyn. It was around like 96 or 97, and that was considered like the biggest insult in the world. It was like, oh my gosh, I have to move to Brooklyn. Now you have a show like Girls and all these and other entities living in Brooklyn is a status symbol. Hey, I live in Bushwick. I live in Greenpoint. I live in Fort Greene. Live in Bed-Stuy, Crown Heights, Williamsburg, all that stuff. So the entity of Brooklyn has changed, and the economics have changed as well. If you look at the population and the land, as far as areas, square miles or feet, and whatever you want to look at it, I think Brooklyn itself would be in the top 10 nationally. Now, New York is number one overall as far as population. New York and L.A., there's always a bit of debate about that as far as how you skew the numbers and what you consider metro New York or Los Angeles. But Brooklyn itself, close to 1 million residents, maybe even more than 1 million residents. And if you look at the land, as I said, it would be a top 10 as far as population in the country. So when the news came out that Kevin Durant and Kyrie Irving signed their deals with the Brooklyn Nets, people's perception of it from the outside seemed like they were going to middle of nowhere America, when in fact they were moving to a top 10 market. If it wasn't Brooklyn, if it was if the Knicks weren't involved, it wasn't the Knicks and the Nets in that same city of New York City, and say it was in St. Louis, Missouri, and there's a St. Louis Nets, and Durant and Irving or DeAndre Jordan also signed with them, it'd be like, oh, okay, that's a little bit different. Or Atlanta, if they signed here, where we were based, Atlanta's a top 10 market. If they signed here, it'd be like, okay, I get it. That's what Brooklyn is. And the perception of having to go to New York City to live, to work, to make your name there has changed. And that's changed a lot in the NBA. There was a time, maybe 20, 30 years ago, the big perception was you had to be on one of the coast. You had to be in New York or LA to make your name, to become famous, to have your commercials, to have all your business dealings in place. And while it does help being in LA, see LeBron James this past year with the Lakers, LeBron was making movies while he was in Cleveland. He was in all the commercials. We see too many commercials with them. He was doing everything that he needed to do that he's doing in LA, he's doing in Brooklyn. Or he's in LA, he's doing in Cleveland. We see Russell Westbrook commercials all the time, whether it's for his clothing or his shoes or the Sprite commercial. He's doing quite all right. So the fact that the New York perception, whether it's this internal aspect of it, and that's I grew up there, I say I'm a New Yorker, where it's like if it's not within the 5 boroughs, it doesn't exist. And if you get really micro about it, if it doesn't exist in the little island of Manhattan, it doesn't exist. You're not looking at the grand scope of things. You're not looking at the big picture. So when we heard about Kevin Durant and Kyrie Irving's friendship, and you saw the pictures during the All-Star break, that was the first tea leaf of, hey, things may be moving towards a direction where they play together. Now, that perception led to the thought that they would sign with the New York Knicks together. And the reports are that that was originally the plan, maybe as far back as a year ago. And the DeAndre Jordan factor as well. And interestingly enough, DeAndre Jordan was traded, or he signed with the Knicks, and he played with them this season. So we got firsthand experience of the New York Knicks. So their friend, DeAndre Jordan, is on the Knicks, literally within the team, seeing the inner workings of it. We saw Durant have his issues with the Warriors. His verbal argument with Draymond Green in the middle of the season, talking about Green saying we don't need you. That internal tension of Durant already joining an NBA champion, and despite Durant, I think, elevating himself to probably the best player in the game, the perception is that this is Steph Curry's team. This is Klay Thompson's team. Draymond was drafted by the Warriors. It's always going to be his squad. And while I scoff at that stuff all the time of whose team is it or whose team it is, that along with who takes the final shot, that argument that is used by sports media really not only to cause divisiveness, which causes interest and tension for you to listen to, but also is used as a vehicle for content. In this case, I think it may have been a reality because we've seen the sensitivity of Kevin Durant from the Twitter issues, of him being trolled and him responding in that way, for him making his statements about not wanting to be a part of the media cycle of providing content. So we've seen a sensitivity towards that. Furthermore, there was the issue of him tearing his Achilles in the NBA Finals after injuring his calf, earlier in the postseason. The issues of was he rushed back too soon by the Warriors or by their team doctors? While was he cleared by them and then Durant his doctors and his agent? All of their questioning of that Achilles injury, which is going to cost him a year of his career and a long rehab period. I personally thought that it's sports. There's no connection. He wanted to come back. He's a grown man. He makes his own decision, and injuries happen. That's just the way professional sports or any sports works. It's unfortunate. We don't want to see injuries, but they happen. But for a player like Kevin Durant, who is in that situation, he's very sensitive to this scenario. So now you have Durant looking at his open options. Kyrie Irving, very interesting guy himself. Drafted by Cleveland Cavaliers to start his career, not a very good situation. LeBron James signs on with the team, they win a championship. He has a critical part in that. While that's going on, though, he wants to make his own lane in his career. LeBron gets a lot of the credit, and deservedly so. He's an all-time great. But Kyrie is an all-star and an all-NBA performer himself. He wants to receive that love. There's tension there. Kyrie gets traded to the Celtics, where he believes it's going to be his team and his opportunity to roll and to do his thing. But he did not choose the Celtics. The Celtics and Cavaliers chose the path for him. So you look at how that goes into place. He goes to Boston, very up and down tenure there. And when he is not on the court, especially 2 years ago, when he was out injured through the postseason, they make it to the Eastern Conference Finals, losing, ironically, or interestingly enough, to the same Cavaliers that he left. He was not on the court, though. He comes back to the team this year, healthy and ready to go. Championship expectations. Him, Jason Tatum, Jaylen Brown, Gordon Hayward. He's back from his injury. He broke his leg that previous year as well. Al Horford on the roster. Championship aspirations. Have an up and down regular season. Get eliminated earlier in the postseason than expected. So now he's looking for his path. Interestingly enough, he is from the Northeast. He's from New Jersey. The Nets used to play in New Jersey. One of the only players I've really heard ever claim to be a New Jersey Nets fan, as far as a prominent player. You have to acknowledge that. Kevin Durant, him moving his business entities to the New York area, from his agency to his finances, all of those entities, while he has his foot in Silicon Valley, in Golden State, in Oakland, San Francisco area, business-wise, he's moving to the Northeast. When he gets his Achilles injury and has surgery the very next day, does he do it with the Warrior doctors or in Oakland or the San Francisco area? No, he gets it done in New York under his doctors. And who did the surgery? The Brooklyn Nets doctor. Now, that's not necessarily uncommon, because the sports doctors for a team will do work on other players because they have their own practices and things like that. But that should have been another tea leaf. And then the DeAndre Jordan factor, which I was not aware of until yesterday. I will say that him and Durant are very close. And Irving is part of that entity as well. So you add that all together, those two wanting to play together, and Jordan as well. Jordan was kind of like a third wheel in this in a way, and he's an extra entity. But let's look at it this way as well. DeAndre Jordan, where did he used to play? With the Clippers. Bad ending of that relationship. So if Durant and Irving want to go to the Clippers and try to bring Jordan along, that might not be the best scenario. So in the end, you look at it and put it all together, the Brooklyn Nets was the choice for them. Durant signs for 4 years, $164 million. Kyrie Irving, 4 years, $141 million. And DeAndre Jordan, 4 years and $40 million. Very nice paycheck for him. But you put it all together, and the Nets made sense for what they're trying to do. And then add insult to injury, and then we'll get to the Knicks in a moment. Durant and Irving do not take the full max so that Jordan could get the $10 million a year in his contract. Durant he walked away from close to $70 million and an extra year of guaranteed money to go from Golden State to Brooklyn. So now you look at the scenario with the Nets. They've been trying to put their foothold or find their place within the New York basketball landscape. The Knicks are who they are. They're the older franchise. They're the more storied franchise. I'll give it that. But if you look at the Knicks and the Nets, and we compare them, and then we're going to transition to what my thoughts on the Knicks are. Better facilities. To train with the Knicks, the train facility, which I've learned with the Hawks, is a major factor in players' decisions because they spend the majority of their time on the practice court than the actual arena. A lot of times they'll come to the arena, play the game, and then go back home to wherever they live. And a lot of times where they live is near the practice facility because that's where they are the majority of the time for training camp, in between games, and all that stuff. For the Knicks, and the New York traffic is real, and this is a legit factor, is about almost an hour, hour and a half away from where they play. If you want to live in New York City, that's fine. But you're heading to Westchester County through traffic to go to the practice facility. You don't even fly out of LaGuardia or Newark. You fly out of Purchase, a different airport. It's just a lot of hassle. And when you're a player like Durant having a long rehab session or dealing with all that, it helps to have convenience. The Nets practice facility, Sunset Park, very close to the facility, very close to Barclays Center where the Nets play. The synergy is there. Better practice court, better facilities, better management. You have Kenny Atkinson, very good head coach. You have Marks, very good GM. There is consistent ownership. There's synergy with them. The Knicks, with James Dolan, that we all know, not a very good owner, has been a very abrasive, has created a toxic environment for the players, the coaching staffs, who he runs through every year or two. He just hires and fires and burns through them, and the media as well, as we see with the issues with the Knicks and the Daily News, New York Daily News. So you see that going on. Better arena to get to. Look, I love Madison Square Garden. I've seen everything you could possibly see there. I've been to the circus. I've seen music shows, Knicks, Nets, college basketball, all that stuff. Beautiful arena. It's the Mecca, if you want to call it that. Convenient to get to. Get off on 34th Street on the train, all that jazz. Barclays is a better arena, better stadium. When you look at the two, better amenities. It's right in the middle of downtown Brooklyn. It's a better area to play basketball. It's more convenient. And furthermore, you're in Brooklyn. It's not like you're in, not in Long Island or in Yonkers. No insulting my Yonkers people and Long Island folks. But you are pretty much in the city. You're literally a 15-minute car ride or 3 stops on the train away from Manhattan. So if you want to live that life and go crazy and go wild, you could do that. Even though Brooklyn, you can get clubs and bars there. You get clubs and bars everywhere. But when you add that all together, that's why I don't see the shock so much in why Durant and Irving went to Brooklyn instead of choosing the Knicks. And the Knicks organization, you have to look at the reality of it. They're not the only show in town. Their ineptitude since the late 90s, when they made that run in 1999 in the run to the finals, lost to San Antonio. Ever since then, it has been a mess. There's been a lack of organization. You have the public relation issues with Dolan confronting the fan and kicking him out and banning him from the stadium for saying sell the team. He didn't curse at him. He didn't swear on his mother. He said sell the team. And that caused Dolan to lose his mind and have a very sensitive skin. You have the very public incident with Charles Oakley. Now, whether you question Oakley was right or wrong, I think there are 2 sides to that story, or maybe 3, Oakley's, Dolan's, and the truth. Seeing an image of one of your former players, a very popular player, I didn't say one of the best, but a very popular player who played a very long time for your organization, being escorted out by police officers in the middle of a game in a very abrasive manner, that's not a good PR look. And the NBA is the most insular sports entity that I cover. When I say insular, I mean everyone knows everything. You look good because it's the lack of numbers. You only have 12, 13 players on a roster. There's only 30 teams. You do the math. Every coach and every player talks to each other. They know all of the inner workings of what's going on. Football, there's too much turnover, too many roster spots, too many players being cut and moved around. Now, if you're a big-time player and you reach that kind of veteran status, then you start to know the ins and outs a little bit more, but too much turnover. Baseball, you got so many guys going in and out with minor leagues and all that stuff. You just go down the line. As far as team sports, Now, you have specific ones like tennis and golf where it's even more minute. And yes, they really know everything as well. But as far as team sports go, basketball is the most, everyone knows everyone. And I see when I go to Hawks games, especially when you're in the bowels, you see all the former Hawks. They know the former Lakers that come around the town. And then the Clippers will come to town. They'll know all of the Hawks guys. It just goes down the line. And trades happen. And if you're in, you're in for life. And then the coaching staff is someone, you'll go from being an assistant with the Bucks to becoming a head coach of the Heat. And then if you're fired from there, you might bounce around, become an assistant on the Spurs. And then 2 years later, you're the Suns head coach. You get what I'm saying? So everyone talks to each other. Everyone knows each other. And when you have an incident like Charles Oakley, that was very public, it just confirmed a lot of the perceptions of what's going on in New York. And then you have the way the Knicks operated afterwards with that BS report about not offering Kevin Durant the max because of the injury. You had every other team in the NBA, Clippers, Nets, Warriors, offering the max. Probably a bunch of other teams that we don't know about, but those are the main candidates that were in the running to sign him. You want us to believe that the Knicks are that one team that did not offer the max contract to Durant because of his injury? That's just a spin job. Durant wanted no part of the Knicks. Didn't even offer him a meeting. He knew what he'd walk into when he would join the Knicks, which has become an overrated franchise. As I mentioned, the Mecca, being a Knick, the Knicks haven't won a championship since 1973. And now the Nets, to be fair, the Nets have not won an NBA championship themselves. But New York's a fun place to play. If you say to all that stuff, you hear Kobe Bryant and LeBron talking about, wow, I enjoy playing in New York. It's the Mecca. It's the home of basketball. But none of them ever considered going to the Knicks. Durant's the same way. And that's why when he made the decision to join the Brooklyn Nets, I was not surprised at all. Now, will they take over New York and be the kings of that city? Winning's the thing that will do that. Because while the Knicks are a unifying front in that city, where if you're a Yankee fan or a Mets fan for baseball, you still like the Knicks. If you like the Rangers, the Islanders, you still like the Knicks. They're the center entity. Giants and Jets for NFL, you had the Knicks as like that unifying squad. So even though I like the Mets, and some of my good friends are Yankee fans, we beef on that, but we all would support the Knicks. I'm a big New York Giants fan. Some of my friends and family even were Jets fans, but we all unified on the Knicks. So that's the way. That's why New York and the Knicks part of it becomes that entity that people really focus on and say, hey, this is the home of basketball because it's the Knicks. But the Nets are moving their way into the entity, but they have to win. Because while these moves are very good, they have to win a championship if they want to really make that mark as this is a Nets town. Because the Knicks do have that ingrained advantage of being there a lot longer. And the Knicks signing Julius Randle to a 3-year deal for $63 million, that's not going to help the cause. And they signed all of these guys to 2-year deals to try to become, when the free agency class of 2021 comes up, includes Giannis, Antetokounmpo, and some others. That's not the approach anymore. The Knicks are really going to have to go the way of the Atlanta Hawks, like I've seen here. You think Atlanta, top 10 market, people love living here, prices are good, it's one of the best arenas in the country, but the Hawks have struggled to sign free agents over the years. So what they've done is they've gone through a transition to draft and trade. And that's what the Knicks are going to have to do right now. They drafted R.J. Barrett. That's a good start. They have Michael Robinson, Dennis Smith, some young Knox, some young entities, 25 years and younger. That's a good beginning. I like that. But they're just going to have to draft and develop those guys, and then maybe eventually you might get a free agent to come with you. But if the structure does not change, specifically James Dolan, the ownership, that's not going to really work out for them. And that's just the way it's going to be for the time being for the Brooklyn Nets and the New York Knicks. Other signings that we saw over the weekend or over Sunday, the Philly. They re-signed Tobias Harris, 5 years, $180 million, and Al Horford going from the Celtics to the Sixers, 4 years, $109 million. Philadelphia, you probably have to say, is the favorite in the East right now. We don't know Kawhi, where he's going. But even if Kawhi finds his way to re-sign with the Raptors, Philly's going to be very tough to beat. Contingent on two things. One, Ben Simmons' jump shot has to be developed to a competent level. Because I look at the roster they have right now, they lack shooters. Now, Harris, you'll say, okay, he's a good shooter, and he is, and he plays solid defense, but they need that guy with the mid-range to take pressure off of Harris having to make all those shots. And that's where Ben Simmons, he has to make that step up to the next level. And secondly, Joel Embiid has to play more consistently, and when he's playing, has to take care of himself physically and mentally and be that consistent force that he can be. He has the potential to be the best center in the league, but he lacks that consistency, and that includes getting in shape and avoiding those knick-knack injuries. If he can do that, Philadelphia can find a nice run. The contracts I'm concerned about, though, year 1 and 2 are going to be good, but the back end of those are going to be rough, especially for the Horford. Al Horford's a solid player. He's a pro, but post players, when you see regression and them slowing down, we saw a little bit of that from Horford last year. They usually go from being solid to borderline out of the league. And you worry about that with Horford playing as long as he has in the back end of that contract. But Philadelphia, I think they see their window as 2 years because they got to re-sign Ben Simmons or make a decision on that. And that's coming up very, very soon. So that's why you signed Harris to 5 years, $180 million. That's a little steep for me, but right now you got to consider them a favorite. Jimmy Butler going to Miami for 4 years, $142 million. That's a little steep for me as well. But Butler's an interesting situation as well. Where does he fit in today's modern game? He's a very good two-way player. His mid-range is strong, when emphasis, though, is on three-pointers. His defense is solid, but defense is being relied on less and less in today's NBA. I know you're going to give me the Raptors and what they did against Golden State, that's fine and dandy, but you have to be able to score. You're putting him down there in Miami, where it's going to be him and I guess Dragic and no one else. Because they're making the numbers work. Whiteside's gone. Josh Richardson, he's gone. He signed actually good signing, Philadelphia. That was a very good move by them to get something out of this deal, if it all works out. And it will. The numbers are kind of odd right now and a bunch of minutia, but they'll get that deal done. He does become the man in Miami, which is a place he's been eyeing for a very long time. Miami is a very solid organization from Pat Riley, the great Pat Riley, and Eric Spoelstra as a head coach. We know what they can do down there. I just don't think they're going to be a championship contender with Butler alone, but we'll see what happens there. Kemba Walker with the Celtics for 4 years, $141 million. Look, if it's down between Kemba Walker and Kyrie Irving, Irving's the better player. But Walker may work better in the scheme that the Celtics do. And the Celtics do have to make a step up this year. No excuses. You have Hayward coming back with a full year from his broken leg. There's not that tension that you can't give an excuse for with Irving. You have Kemba. You have Jaylen Brown. They need to step up. And even Jason Tatum, who needs to step up his game as well. And also head coaching. Brad Stevens is a very good head coach, but we're putting him in that Phil Jackson, Red Auerbach, Pat Riley realm. But he had a bad year of coaching this past year, and he acknowledged it. So with Kemba Walker there, they have to make a run to the finals now to make this worthwhile. All of these assets and trying to be the smartest guys in the room when they have been average over the past 2 years. Well, this past year, they were an average team. Now, Golden State's another interesting deal as well. Klay Thompson, he's re-signing with them. We expect that he'll be out this year, upcoming, but he's a max guy. Him and Steph Curry, Splash Brothers backcourt, they're going to stay the same. The trade for D'Angelo Russell, though, for 4 years and $117 million, very odd signing or trade, in my opinion. If they can flip it, then I respect it. We're not, for this upcoming year, obviously Klay Thompson's going to be out with the ACL injury. Russell and Curry, they can kind of work well together, smallish backcourt. Maybe go with the Isaiah Thomas, Joe Dumars kind of deal with a small group as far as your backcourt goes. But long term, though, I don't see Russell and Curry and Thompson working out long term. I think what's going to happen is Russell eventually will be traded whenever Thompson works his way back into the lineup. Or if you want to ride it out for 1 year, just play small ball the entire year with Thompson, Russell, and Curry in the starting lineup. It'd be intriguing, but I still think that that's not going to work out overall for those guys. As far as championship contendership, you need Thompson back. You need to get everyone up and ready and running before the Warriors are a championship team. Porzingis stays with the Mavs for 5 years, $158 million. No surprise there. Middleton stays with the Bucks, 5 years, $178 million, and also kept Brook Lopez at 4 years, $52 million. I personally would have probably kept Malcolm Brogdon instead of Lopez. But the Bucks are a team where they don't attract free agents quite often. They have to trade for their talent and trade for it. And when you have Giannis, who is a once-in-a-generation talent overall and for that franchise, you have to make him happy and you have to build around it. And Middleton, while that's a steep price, he works well beside Giannis, and Lopez works well within the system. You have to do that. You have to sign him for a little bit more than you would want. Now, Brogdon going to Indiana, it's a very intriguing move. I know they lost Bogdanovic to Utah, but Brogdon and Oladipo, I think, will work well together, especially when you consider they have Turner as well in the post. I like the move by the Pacers. J.J. Redick to New Orleans for 2 years, $26.5 million. I like that move as well. They need a veteran in that locker room. Now, a lot of young guys who have bad habits, from Lonzo Ball, Brandon Ingram, Zion. I'm not saying he has bad habits, but he's a rookie. Drew Holiday is a veteran. I'll give you that. But they just need another solid pro in there in that lineup to get these guys through the next phases of their careers, and that's where Redick will be a good job for them. Now, Bogdanovic, I just mentioned him going to Utah, 4 years, $73 million. The Jazz are not my favorite to win the West, but with Mike Conley signing with them and a strong form of Rudy Gobert and maturation of Donovan Mitchell, things are looking very up for Utah. You have to look at Utah and Denver and Oklahoma City for that matter. A lot of these teams are already established and are really looking to take advantage of this kind of redshirt year in a way for the Golden State Warriors before they get back to championship contention. Or the Warriors may have reached their peak, played in 5 straight finals, won 3 of them. This may be the most or the best that we ever see from Golden State. So Utah, they've become a playoff team. They've taken advantage. They may make that step up. Denver may make that step up as well. It's going to be very interesting to see what happens in the West. So those are my free agency thoughts. I delved a lot deep into my New York roots. I didn't expect to go that far into my past. But the reason I did that, though, is to show that this perception of Brooklyn being this backwoods, lack of electricity, two-stoplight town compared to the New York Knicks is very inaccurate. And that's where it's seeing with the Durant decision and Irving showing that. So the rest of the nation is now seeing kind of what we New Yorkers have known from the very beginning. Brooklyn is definitely in the house. All right, we're going to take a break, and when we come back, we're going to discuss Atlanta United and MLS and the rest of the international competitions in soccer on the Offside Trap portion of our show here on the Sports Inquirer Show. All right, everybody, welcome back to the show. It's going to be the final segment of the Sports Inquirer Show today. We're going to break down I talk all about Netflix and politics and all that stuff down there. We'll do that for tomorrow's show. We have a little bit more time to discuss that. But yeah, let's get to the Offside Trap and Atlanta United as they were able to defeat Montreal Impact 2-1 at home on June 29th. Justin Meram, the new acquisition or the recent acquisition from Orlando City, he scored 2 goals for the club. His first 2 goals with Atlanta. And Atlanta won a 6th straight home match in league play. So Atlanta, after the international break and having about close to a month off from MLS action has returned with 2 matches in the past week. They had the road loss to Toronto last Wednesday, and I said they were able to win this recent match 2-1 at home over Montreal. So let's hear from manager Frank de Boer on his overall thoughts on the win, and then we'll break down the game and go into some more specifics from the contest. Let's hear from manager Frank de Boer.
I just said, I'm very proud of the team. They play with so much discipline because it's so tempting to go in that narrow spaces and force you to make mistakes. And I think we played like 19 minutes very concentrated. First half, they always will get a chance, And the first half they had one opportunity at a counter attack when PT made a with his heel back, how do you call it? Back heel, and then the counter attack started. But for the rest, I think they didn't have one shot on goal. And also the second half, the corner kick, okay, that's something that can happen. The guy shoots the ball totally wrong, and it comes in the feet of another player, and he scores. So we were really played, I think, very concentrated. And of course, it's difficult to create many chances when a team plays that deep on their own half. But we still believe in it, and we still played concentrated, very concentrated when we conceded the 1-1. And I think we really deserve this win. And finally, we are the good side of the score right now. A lot of times we conceded a late goal against us, and now we get one, and so that feels really well. And I think again, they really deserve it because they put a lot of effort in it today.
And that was manager Frank de Boer discussing the Atlanta United win over Montreal. By the way, all of our audio today is courtesy of Atlanta United Communications. We're very grateful to receive the audio from them in our post-match activity. So thank you, Atlanta United, for this audio. Slow start, as manager Frank de Boer mentioned, that Montreal came in really playing 5 men back as far as their back line. And that's very tough for Atlanta to penetrate. They actually forced a lot of long passes. And at first 25, 30 minutes, Atlanta struggled with that. There's a lot of midfield play. But you saw Atlanta starting to make those chip passes over the defenders. And one of those type of scenarios led to the first goal. Pity Martinez played a ball to Meram on the out wide to the left. He was able to cut the ball inside on his left foot, and he shot the ball to the right corner of the post past the Montreal goalkeeper for the 1-0 lead. One of the prettier goals you'll see in the entire year. Meram really took advantage of the open space with his cutback and shot the ball. And I think that was their first or second official shot on goal in the match. And that's where Meram just took advantage of the chance, just shot it, and it was able to go in. Montreal to equalize it in the 50th minute. He was a corner that was collected by Novillo at the top of the box, and he ripped a shot that was redirected by Diallo past goalkeeper Brad Guzan to make the score 1-1. Atlanta was able to regain the lead in the 83rd minute, however, from a corner. Julian Gressel, he took the set piece and headed it towards the back post, towards Gonzalez Perez. Now the ball was able to it bounced around a little bit in the penalty area, and Breck Shea poked the ball across the goal line, and was tapped in by Meram for a second goal of the match. Very good play by Shea, who, by the way, I think has become a very good player for Atlanta this year. I was very critical of him earlier in the season playing the left back position because I'm very high, and I still am very high on George Bello, but he's out with injury, and Breck Shea has really played in that spot. Uncomfortable spot for him, a spot he hasn't played that often, but he's been able to come in and as a substitute in some matches, and even starting, he's really found his form and showing that MLS veteran form. And I said Meram was able to get that second goal and really saved them offensively. We'll get into the struggles of Pity Martinez in the match. Then he just did not have his best match against Montreal, but Meram was the guy who picked up the slack and was able to score those 2 goals. I think you're starting to see the depth of the team being tested right now with the unavailability of all these the frontline players. We had Joseph Martinez, who just finished up his commitment to Venezuela from their Copa America, so he should be back eventually. But then you have Ezequiel Barco dealing with injury, and Tito Villalba as well. All those guys are frontline players, and they're unavailable. And Pity Martinez, I have to keep saying Pity and Joseph Martinez guys are players. So Pity Martinez just did not have his best performance, and he struggled with that. And so we'll break that down on the next show when we preview the Chicago matchup on July 3rd. But let's hear from Meram on the goals and getting the important win for Atlanta.
For me, it's just important to take advantage of this opportunity and help the team any way possible, defensively, offensively, and fortunate that put a couple away.
Tell us about the first one. Were you thinking shoot the whole time?
Once I got by the guy, I was in a position that I love to cut in from the left side and hit it, and it was a great strike.
Something long range kind of required right there. It was kind of bunched up at the back. They seem to be back there kind of bunched up for most of the match.
Yeah, anytime you play a team with a back five, it's going to be very tight and there's not going to be much space. So sometimes you got to be patient, and then individuals need to create a bit of magic and flair. And I was fortunate to get a little bit of space and cut in and take my shot.
What was the cell?
This was a different celebration. This was of joy for the city and these fans to really bring me in and excuse me, really just to bring me in as one of the guys and to help any way possible. And that means so much as a player. I'm very thankful for that. He runs in behind, and I kind of changed my position to come underneath, and Kitty gave me the ball, and it was just one of those, create something, because they've been sitting back, kind of letting us have most of the possession, and you just gotta sometimes take shots. And thank you.
All right, and that was Meram discussing the win and his 2 goals. And let's hear from goalkeeper Brad Guzan on the Montreal win, and then we'll wrap up our thoughts on the contest. Here is Brad Guzan.
To bounce back in a positive way. It was a difficult game tonight. They came in with a clear plan of playing counterattacking football, sitting in and making it really difficult for us. And they certainly did that for 90 minutes. But at the end of the day, it was important that we got 3 points. Didn't matter how. Wasn't the prettiest of games, but these games are sometimes difficult when they get 11 guys behind the ball in their own half, and they force you to try and break them down, and they get deflection set piece. Makes things a little bit interesting towards the end, but fortunately we were able to get a second one and see out the game.
What did you think of?
Listen, we all know his quality. To see the first goal go in, obviously it shows what he brings to the team and what he can do with the ball at his feet. Second one, just kind of sniffs it out, and right place, right time.
All right, and that was Brad Guzan talking about the win and his thoughts on the performance of Meram. So, yeah, Atlanta now will face Chicago on the road on July 3rd. On our next show, we'll have an in-depth preview of that contest, as well as some pre-match audio from the head coach and some of the players. So let's move on to the Gold Cup in the premier competition in CONCACAF. The U.S. men's national team was able to earn a 1-0 win over Curaçao last night on June 30th. Weston McKennie was the first half goal, proved to be the game winner. Very nice two-way play between Christian Pulisic, crossing the ball to McKennie over through the penalty area, and the header went into the net by McKennie, the German league or Bundesliga partners in crime. Now, Pulisic plays for, they used to be. I got used to all these transfers. Pulisic used to play for Borussia Dortmund, of course, and then McKennie with Schalke. But now Pulisic is with Chelsea in the English Premier League. McKennie is now still with Schalke. They signed a long-term extension with them. Very excited for him. But overall, a win is a win. Wasn't the best effort. I thought Pulisic played very well and was very aggressive on the front foot of the offense, and he was able to get that cross in. And I said McKennie took advantage of it. But it's a victory. And when you get to this tournament stage, you just want to advance. We saw Mexico win over Costa Rica on penalties. That's the way things work as far as these tournaments. You just want to win, find a way to get through. Now, we'll say that type of performance against Jamaica will probably lead to a loss by the men's national team, so they got to step things up. Zardes may have to step into the reserve role if Josie Altidore is healthy as a starter. But yeah, we'll preview that matchup a little bit more in depth on our next show as well, as far as playing Jamaica. The women's national team they defeated France in the quarterfinals of the Women's World Cup, and now they face England on July 2nd. So that'll be a very good activity as well, and we'll recap that one on our next show. All right, we got to end the show a little bit early. We got some timing issues, and it's a lightning storm approaching us, so want to make sure that we record everything, make sure everything is right. But thanks for listening to our show, and as always, head to thesportsinquirer.net for all of the news and notes in the world of sports. For us, Twitter and Instagram, Sports Inquirer, all one word. Facebook, The Sports Inquirer, and then finally subscribe to us on YouTube and SoundCloud under The Sports Inquirer. Until next time, good fight and good night.